Welcome to First Strike right here on VEASAN. I'm your host, Dave Ross. For the next hour, we're going to break down everything from a pretty good card here at UFC Fight Night as we have Kattar against Emmett. And really, this card is sneaky deep, so we're going to really try to break it down and see if we can find some betting advantages for you, the viewer and listener, today here on First Strike. To help me do that, Finocchiaro, Kevin Iole, Jordan Sherwood, and Reed Kuhn will join me throughout the hour. But without further ado, let's bring in the man I follow on Twitter, @Gamblue, and the host of the Bout Business Podcast. He is Lou Finocchiaro. Lou, great to have you back on the show, as always, my friend. I look at this card here, and again, you can go to the first fight on the board here with Roman Dolidze against Kyle Daukaus, and you go up from there and you see names like Phil Hawes and Darren Wynn and Eddie Wineland and Cody Stamen. I mean, it's a really, really deep card even before you get to the main card with Calvin Kattar against Josh Emmett. But let's start at the top. What do you make of this power here that Kattar brings? We know Emmett is no slouch in that category as well. How do you view this fight right now with Kattar right now over a $2 favorite?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. That's a great lineup of fight enthusiasts that are coming on, and I'm looking forward to listening to the whole show, Dave. As far as that fight's concerned, a lot of these fights are about styles. Some are really different, some similar. This one is relatively different. And what you have here, as I handicap this fight, Kattar has been more active against world-class fighters recently. He's the taller, longer, younger man. Emmett has been less active, recovering from injuries and the attrition from some of those injuries that he's had. However, when he's on, he's good. He can cut the octagon very effectively. He tends to have maybe less precision than Kattar. He chooses maybe a little bit more power. He's using hooks and crosses a lot more, and he wants to touch up. It's going to be Kattar trying to keep distance and counter, and it's going to be Emmett trying to get in the pocket and do damage.
Yeah, no question about it. We've seen Kattar against wrestlers in the past, certainly like my buddy Ricardo Lamas. Didn't end well for Ricardo with that right hand. I look at the total rounds, and the reason why I bring that up is people do forget the power maybe that Calvin Kattar possesses. The over right now, it's juiced to the over 4.5 rounds in this potential 5-round non-title bout. Do you think it goes deep into the night, or might we have a quicker night than people expect?
Boy, Dave, if I envision something quick, I think it's that Emmett touches him. Outside of that, I think Kattar does more work via attrition. I don't see him finishing Emmett. I actually would lean to Kattar in a decision. That said, I'm using him in a parlay with another fighter, and so I don't want to try and get too cute picking, because that's going to be a very competitive fight.
Yeah, good point there. And if you want to try to find that plus value, as Lou normally does here, you see decision is plus 130 for Calvin Kattar if it goes to the cards and he gets his hand raised that way. Lou, let's go right down the road here, because, again, this fight was supposed to happen not too long ago with Cowboy Cerrone against Joe Lauzon. These are two Hall of Famers, in my opinion, certainly once their careers are finally said and done. We saw the first time around, before the fight actually was supposed to happen, it really got steamed up over $2 for the Cowboy, Donald Cerrone, here. And it really does catch me by surprise here, Lou, that I look at the number now, and it's still $1.65. So Cowboy's still the solid favorite, but not like it was. Do you expect that steam to come in again? Or what might be different potentially just a month removed from the first time they were supposed to fight?
Dave, I have had very little opinion on that fight 2 weeks ago, and I got less opinion on it now. To me, I don't know why Cowboy is still fighting. I look at Lauzon's last performance, and it's still credible. And quite honestly, I lean to him as an underdog in this situation, but I didn't use the fight. But gun to my head, it's Joe Lauzon or pass for me.
And again, when you look at the total rounds here, 1.5 of this potential 3-round bout here, again, juiced to the over that we might get 7.5 minutes of octagon time to $1.45. Look, we know when you get older in your career, and these guys certainly fit that bill, it doesn't take a whole lot sometimes to get you out of there. But then conversely, these two guys also can fight some wars of attrition. Which way do you think that might go if you had to play a lean on the total rounds?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so for me, I think the over translates to Lauzon. and the under translates to Cowboy. Others may see it different, but to me, if Cowboy is fresh and can get a shin to the chin, he's got a shot. But if he doesn't after a round and a minute, I think it's going to be all Joe getting on top and taking him down.
Lou, when you think about talkers in sports, right? Draymond Green, Golden State just won another title. He likes to yap at you during the games there. We know Khabib Nurmagomedov liked to do that when he was in the octagon as well. I don't know that anybody talks more than Kevin Holland when he's inside that octagon. Going up against Tim Means, kind of a no business guy in Tim Means. What do you make of Holland here? Because sometimes the talking does him good and sometimes it doesn't.
Well, this is a guy that's moving from 185 down to 170 and Means, now 38 years old, he's used to being the taller, longer bully in the octagon. He isn't going to be in this fight. And so to me, this looks like a little bit of a serve up. I don't want to demean Tim Means by any way, shape, or form. The guy's a warrior, has a great record. He's an OG in the UFC, but this is a really tough task. Whether Holland talks a lot or not, it doesn't really bother me. It's part of his personality. I'll also add this. Holland is from Fort Worth. These fights are in Texas, and this is the Texas Fight Commission we're talking about here. I'll say it like that.
I'm picking up what you're putting down, Lou. That's valuable information, though, for the wager. Before you make those wagers, you should know that type of information. The under right now, if you think it's going to go earlier, and Kevin Holland might be able to get that stoppage, under 2.5 rounds right now, plus $1. Slightly juiced to the over here, over 2.5 rounds at $1.30. What do you make of Means? He is tough. He's durable, but is this a little bit too much against the younger fighter in Kevin Holland?
You know, that's a great one. I tend to think that I want to respect Means and that this goes to decision. That said, Means has said in his interviews this week, he's here to collect a check and give the fans what they want to see. And Holland wants to finish this fight. So I'm going to just stay with the side and use Holland with Kattar, which is minus 103, minus 105 proposition for a 2-fighter parlay, bet 105 to win 100. I think that's where I'm going to go with those two fights because I trust both those favorites.
I love where your head's at there. Again, taking those two bigger favorites, put them in a two-way parlay and get almost even money on it. That's the way you can certainly shorten those odds. For sure. Let's get to Joaquin Buckley here. He's a $2 underdog right now against Albert Duraev. What do you make of this matchup here for Buckley here, getting almost a pretty sizable dog in this contest?
Yeah, and I think he should be. And without taking anything from him, to me, this is the prototypical styles. And what you have here is you got a guy from the city in Buckley, and he's a striker, and he stands. He ain't going to wrestle, and he doesn't know how to spell grappling. And he's a smart guy, but that's not his game. He's there to do damage with his striking. On the other side, you got a Russian vice grip that's a master of sport in Sambo as well. He can strike and looked a little stale in his UFC debut. This is really, this is an appetizer for Duraev, and I took him inside the distance plus 130. I really think that's a play people can consider and get a really good fighter in a good position at plus money.
Lou, I know that you like the Kattar and Holland parlay, and I think that is a very, very astute way to shorten those numbers. Is there another play on this board that you really like in the main event?
In the main event?
Well, I'll give you the whole card.
The main card.
Sure, I'll give you the main card rather.
We're looking at the main card, yes, and I wrote it up in Point Spread Weekly. This is Kazakhstani Damir Ismagulov against Goram Kutadladze, who's Georgian Russia. These are two vice grips that are going to face each other. Both have been a little inactive. The difference is Magulov maybe a little more refined, a little more well-rounded. And on the other side, Kutadladze, who's a training partner with Khamzat Chimaev. We know he better know how to grapple, and he has cardio, or he's not around those guys. So this is going to be a fascinating matchup. Kutadladze with power and advantage on the feet, because Ismagulov's been stunned a few times. Ismagulov possibly the more refined grappler on the ground. This is going to be a fascinating fight. You give me any of those two guys, you make whatever guy the dog, I'm taking him. That's Kudalaze plus 140. I think he's in a good position.
I love Kudalaze at that number, Lou. And again, when you mention the training partners there, that should be noted as well. So if he can get this fight down to the ground, you got to think that plus dog has a good chance of cashing. Very quickly, is there any other fight, even on the prelims here? Because look, when I see a former champion like Eddie Wineland, a huge underdog, we can understand why now. Court McGee's still going here in the UFC against Jeremiah Wells. Adrian Yanez, always an exciting fighter against Tony Kelly. I mentioned Delice against Kyle Dawkins. I mean, it really is deep, and those are just prelim fights. Any of those really attract your attention?
Well, you're right in indicating that this card is deep and it's got great fights. And the Yanez-Kelly fight is fascinating to me. I was perfectly ready to credit Kelly by giving that fight a release as the fight goes to the distance plus one whatever. However, Kelly missed weight, looked sucked and bad during the weigh-ins. And one more thing, Yanez is the other fighter from Texas. So I'm a little bit cold on that fight based on the weight miss, but that'll be an excellent fight. And I think Kelly's there to make it a fight. And he's got more ways to win. Yanez will be tested on the ground in that fight.
Lou, I think you do a great job when you watch those weigh-ins and see what you can glean from it. Very important information as always. And again, check out the Bout Business podcast that Lou has up before every UFC card. Lou, appreciate the time and the information as always.
Thanks for having me on, Dave. Good luck to everybody.
When we come back, Kevin Iole rejoins the program. Come on back. It's First Strike on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you plenty of ways to bet the UFC. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. You're going to be able to bet on more ways than just the main event. DraftKings has great odds on fight lines, total rounds, and futures for MMA events. Eligible restrictions to apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for the full terms and conditions. Back here on First Strike, I am Dave Ross, joined once again by Kevin Iole. Great to have Kevin back in the program from Yahoo Sports. Follow him on Twitter, as I do, at Kevin I. And, you know, since it's a combat show, sports show here, Kevin, we're going to get to a boxing play that you have to begin this segment here because it is for the unified light heavyweight title. So tell me about Artur Beterbiev against Joe Smith Jr. plus $5 on the comeback for the challenger. Is this a live dog scenario?
I think it is. You know, it is a really good fight. Both of these guys can crack. And so, you know, there's a lot of good potential plays here. You know, I like the fight to not go the distance. So that's one of the plays I look at because Smith is 28-3 with 23 knockouts, but one of his 3 losses was by knockout. Beterbiev is 17-0 with 17 KOs. So I think it's 40 of their 45 professional fights or 47 professional fights have ended inside the distance. So I think this one ends inside the distance. You know, really difficult to play Beterbiev at the number he's at. You know, he's been going up all week. I didn't look this morning, but the last I saw yesterday, he was -9. You know, and that's you know, that's a little high, even though I like Beterbiev as a fighter a lot. But I do the play that I made on this was inside the distance. Will it go 12 full rounds, and so I bet no. And then the other one that I bet, this was, I picked Beterbiev between 7 and 12. I think this is going to be a firefight. You're going to see both guys landing big shots. But I think as the fight goes on, Beterbiev is a little bit classier fighter. And I think his power will begin to weigh on Joe Smith. The common man, as they call him. And, he has been in there with some good opponents, but including Dimitri Bivol, who gave Canelo Alvarez everything he wanted when he defeated him a couple weeks ago. But I think Beterbiev wins this. So I took Beterbiev. That was my second play. Beterbiev to win in round 7 and 12. I think it's going to be more like in that 9-10 range that he does it, but I gave myself a little bit of a window.
I like that window. And again, that's for the unified light heavyweight titles here. So a lean to that under. I'm with you on that, Kevin. Like that play here. Let's get back to this card here down deep in the heart of Texas. Should be a pretty good fight card. Adrian Yanez is kind of the guy you look at as maybe one of the next, right? That the UFC would really like to see come out victorious against Tony Kelly, but Tony Kelly doesn't care about all that. It feels like a firefight that we're going to get here in this potential 3-round matchup. How do you break it down? What do you think is the most profitable angle to it?
I think you got to go look at Yanez, right? Because I think they're both good strikers. I think Tony Kelly makes more mistakes. Now, the thing is, Tony Kelly is a guy that, he swings for the fences a lot of times, Dave. And when you have a guy like that, he's open to be countered, open to be hit. But if he lands on the button, he has the power to knock out Yanez. So you can't just go blindly. But I think Yanez is one of those guys, I see, future championship contender in Adrian Yanez. And so from my standpoint, I think, a little bit different class of fighter than Tony Kelly. I recognize the fact that Kelly, can crack, but I'm going to go ahead with Yanez here, and I will play Yanez to win this fight.
And also, when you look at the total rounds here, potentially a 3-round fight, the under right now, 2.5 rounds, plus $1. If he does it in style, which I'm sure Yanez would like to do here, is there value in that number that potentially it's not a long night down there in Texas?
I think there is. And, there's another factor at play here. Yanez was critical of Tony Kelly. Tony Kelly was cornering Andrea Lee a few weeks ago in Las Vegas, and he made what some people thought was a racist comment. Among the people who criticized him for that was Adrian Yanez. So they've had a little bit of back and forth. So it makes you wonder, is there a little more emotion? Are they going to be fighting with more emotion? And it would be Tony Kelly who would have that more emotion to try to prove something to Yanez. And if he does that, I think that opens him up too. So I do think there's value in playing the under in this fight.
Yeah, sometimes those grudges, you get in there, you want to make a statement. We can certainly remember that back in the day with Derek Lewis when he got a knockout of Ronda Rousey's boyfriend, Travis Brown, at the time, if we all remember how that fight ended. Let's get to Kevin Holland against Tim Means, because, look, I don't know how you feel about talkers, and I know in boxing you get a lot of them that like to let you know what's going on, and you don't even need play-by-play with a guy like Kevin Holland. He'll let you know exactly what's going on against a no-business guy here in Tim Means. Certainly the veteran here in Means, he's been around the block. What do you make of this matchup? Will youth be served in this one?
To me, if Tim Means were in his prime, then I look at this fight a lot differently. But he has a style that is really built for Kevin Holland, right? And Kevin Holland is a bigger guy, lankier guy, has the the reach and all that. And so I just don't see a way that Tim Means wins this fight. Holland, the guys that Holland has problem with are the guys that can get him on the ground, the guys that have something other than just boxing and kickboxing. Tim Means is pretty much a kickboxer, going to go out there, and I think that sets up really nicely for Kevin Holland. I like Holland in that fight. I think it's a pretty high lay. I think it's like 270 if I'm not mistaken, but I do like Holland there.
Kevin, we're both obviously been around the block a little bit in combat sports, and it never really bothered me when I hear guys yapping inside either an octagon or a squared circle. Do you think Kevin Holland, that's just who he is? And if he's not talking and chirping at his opponent, then something's wrong with him?
I think that is who he is, right? And he learned, and I think part of he learned at the Contender Series. He got a lot of notoriety because Dana White called him Big Mouth, and a lot of people talked about him because of that. And the more he's talked, the more attention he's gotten, and he's probably more known than most fighters at the stage of his career he's at would be from talking. So I look at him and I think he's a guy that has to. But the one thing I criticize him about is, hey, you're talking when you're fighting guys like Derek Brunson, you have no defense for their wrestling. Dude, right. You got to diversify your game. Give him credit. He went out to the West Coast, worked at AKA with Daniel Cormier and the group there. So hopefully his ground game and his wrestling is a little bit better.
Yeah, it's so funny because I know a lot of times commentators and certainly fans alike are like, why don't they just stop talking? Sometimes that's the way they get into a fight. So let's see how that plays out against Tim Means. Let's look at Durev against Joaquin Buckley here. Buckley, a sizable dog in this one. Is there a play possibly on the dog, or do you think the favorite is the over $2 favorite for a reason?
I mean, this sets up, you would think, to be a win for Beterbiev, right? Because, he's got the wrestling, he's got the grappling, he's a guy, and Buckley's takedown defense is terrible, right? So he's a guy that, you can get off his feet. Now, if he's on his feet, he's maybe the most dangerous guy in the UFC. So it's like, what do you think happens here? I'm going to go ahead and play Buckley in this fight, and I'll tell you why I'm going to do that. And I could be dead wrong, because you could have Beterbiev shoot, and once he's down on the ground, then it's over. Beterbiev hasn't been fighting. I think he's fought twice since 2017 or 18. Hasn't been active, and Buckley has been highly active. And that sense of timing that you get from being in the ring all the time, I think Buckley has a lot of good different striking weapons. We know he has the kick, as he showed Impa Kasangane a while back, but he has a lot of different weapons. And I think as a dog, he is the guy on the card I really like to think he might be able to get something done.
Kevin, the main event is so intriguing to me because you look at Calvin Kattar, and certainly can fight different ways, right? He knocked out the wrestler in Ricardo Lamas, then got into a striking matchup with Max Holloway. That didn't go very well. And then, he comes back and he looks sensational in his last fight. What do you make of him against Josh Emmett here? Because Emmett actually could be the bigger puncher, and that might not be something that Calvin Kattar's used to.
Yeah, I think this is a really fun fight. I mean, I wanted to talk about this one, Dave, because I just think it's going to be a fight that people are going to go, wow, when they watch it. Because two guys that don't take backward steps, two guys that like to throw. I think Emmett has a little, maybe heavier hands. I think Kattar is a little bit more accurate puncher. And I think in a fight where you're going to see volume, I think the length and the accuracy of Calvin Kattar is going to be the difference here. Josh Emmett is as tough a guy as there is in the UFC. In his last fight, or not his last fight, but 2 fights ago against Shane Burgos, 20 seconds into the fight, he completely tears his ACL. Fights the entire rest of the fight and wins the decision. And so, he's like a roach. If you can't finish it, you step on him, it doesn't even crush him. But I think, Calvin Kattar has been in there like with the Max Holloways and those Gegachikadze last time out. And I think that, having that kind of experience against those high-level guys, you know how to handle yourself. You don't push too much. I know Emmett's going to really be pushing to, kind of force his name into the title conversation in the UFC's deepest division. So, I think Emmett has a chance to win this fight, but I like Kattar. And I think the odds to me look pretty good here. So I will take Calvin Kattar to win this one.
Yeah, the Giga Chikadze fight certainly coming of age for Calvin Kattar. What a stunning and impressive performance that was. Kevin, hey, really appreciate the time as always. And again, give a follow at Kevin I. Enjoy the fight Saturday night, Kevin. We'll catch up again soon.
Thanks so much, Dave. See you soon.
There he is, everybody. Kevin Iole from Yahoo Sports. When we come back, Jordan Sherwood joins the program from Chicago. Come on back. It's First Strike right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. We continue First Strike right here on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross. Always a pleasure to go back to the Windy City and be rejoined by Jordan Sherwood. Follow him on Twitter as I do at Woodon1063. And, of course, he is the co-host of the Unnamed MMA podcast. Jordan, great to have you back in the program, my friend. As I leave Chicago, every time I bring you on the show, I feel like I'm back in Chicago just a little bit. Tell me about the podcast so far and how the pod with no name keeps rolling along.
It is rolling along. We did have to apologize this week for some of the selections we gave out. But look, I'm not talking to too many people that did well last Saturday for UFC 275. I mean, who would have thought Yuri Prohaska's submission win in the 5th round? Nonetheless, we chug along and we give you, our handicapping advice, our selections for the fights, sprinkle in a little bit of Windy City magic in between. have some fun and don't have a name for it until we do, which I'll give you that update when we do.
All right, if it gets a name, I know how it got a name. That means some money has been put behind that. That is for sure. Jordan, let's get to this week's card here. And again, it feels like a Legends matchup here when you got the Cowboy against Joe Lauzon here. The crowd is absolutely going to love this fight deep in the heart of Texas. Do you love this fight? And if so, what angle do you think might be the most profitable?
I love this fight, absolutely. I loved it the last time, 35 days ago when they were supposed to be matched up and Cowboy gets food poisoning, has a pull out of the fight. And I like Joe Lauzon in that fight, and I like him even more 35 days later. I think the matchup favors him because Joe Lauzon, what do we know about him? He's a fast starter. He's a guy that pressures, and he's well-versed whether it goes to the ground or the fight remains standing. And he looked brilliant in his last fight, albeit it was 2 years ago in his hometown of Boston against Jonathan Pierce. But he was a bat out of hell in that fight. Mm-hmm. And I'm surprised he's still fighting. Cowboy Cerrone is not the same fighter. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. This is fight number 38 for him. But he is a notorious slow starter. And when Alex Morano, in the last fight that Cowboy had, a guy that isn't a slow starter, or a fast guy, a guy that isn't a finisher, is able to overwhelm Cowboy and get him out of there early, I think Joe Lauzon can do the same. I'm surprised he's at plus 145. So I think the under for sure is a play because I think there's going to be a quick finish. In all likelihood, I think it's J-Lo. I think Joe Lauzon overwhelms with pressure, gets a fight to the ground, or finishes Cowboy standing. I hate to see it, a shop-warm Cowboy now, the tail end of his career. That's the guy that we have, a guy that just is not the same fighter that was on the come up and was, an outstanding fighter for so many years.
And again, if you like Lauzon to get this stopped as Jordan does, look at that plus value of KO, TK, or DQ, plus 450 if he does that. You mentioned the Yuri Prochazka fight, and the reason why I mentioned that is if it does get down to the ground, is there any way that Joe slaps a sub attempt on here at plus 6-1, $6? Do you think that could be the way the fight could end, or do you think it's just ground and pound, and if it gets stopped inside of a round and a half, that's the way he gets it done?
No, I think it could. I mean, look, we have seen Cowboy Cerrone at times, get hurt and finish on the ground. And Joe Lauzon, certainly his preference, his Brazilian jiu-jitsu background would be to get the fight to the ground, lock up an arm, wrap his arms around the neck of Cowboy. But I think the more likelihood is just the finish via TKO because that's how we've seen Cowboy get finished before. And I also don't like the weight cut for Cowboy, 35 days, twice now in a row. It's a tough cut for him at 155. He's 38 years of age now. So that's another reason why I like Joe Lauzon come tomorrow night.
Boy, the under, if you like that, plus money. Lauzon, if you like that, plus money. If you like Joe by KO, TK, or DQ, plus 450. So a lot of profitable possibilities there if you're on the side of Joe Lauzon in this one. Look, whenever you have Yanez and Kelly here, we expect this fight to have some fireworks here. So we understand why Adrian is a big favorite here. Yanez minus 275 in that ballpark here against Tony Kelly. Is there another angle to this fight do you think might be a little bit more profitable?
I think there's a finish. Look, I think Adrian Yanez, the UFC has identified this guy as a big-time talent. We saw his skill set on display against Randy Costa. Of course, that took a round to get going, but he finished him. I think Tony Kelly is a little bit of a step down in competition. No disrespect to him. He's a well-traveled fighter. But, Tony Kelly didn't look good on the scale. He misses weight. He's a little bit older of a fighter. And he, kind of like Joe Lauzon, pressure fighter, puts himself in the face. But Adrian Yanez, his versatility and the power that he possesses, I think now, especially because of what we saw Tony Kelly look like Friday on the scales, I think leans to a finish. Adrian Yanez is once again going to get a highlight reel knockout. So Yanez for sure, not just a straight money line because there's got to put him in a parlay. So get some more value. Look for him to get the finish inside the distance and quite frankly, get the finish via TKO, KO as he finishes off Tony Kelly.
Yeah, Yanez now up to minus 280 now here. As we look at these numbers, they have drifted up, certainly on Yanez. Talking with Jordan Sherwood out of Chicago. Follow him at Wood on 1063. Let's get to the always entertaining Kevin Holland. Hasn't always been profitable if you've played him recently, but we know his pedigree. Now, he's going to take on Tim Means back at 170 pounds. Means the veteran in the UFC for sure here. Holland, we feel like might be on the cusp of something. What that is, I'm not quite sure, because sometimes he's fooled us in the past. What do you make of Kevin Holland in this big spot with a big number against Tim Means?
I mean, I think he's finally at the weight class. I think 170 is the place where he needs to be. If the weight cut isn't too drastic, he's athletic, he's powerful. And as long as he's focused, he's not talking to Daniel Cormier, he's not giving thumbs up to the camera, what have you. I think he's going to get a finish in this fight. I mean, Tim Means is a great fighter, well-traveled, 37 years of age now, but a 3-fight win streak, very good Muay Thai. And while he has wrestling in his back pocket, I don't think he's going to use it. That's the kryptonite for Kevin Holland, but I think it's going to be a stand-up fight. Means gets hit, just like Tony Kelly gets hit. Tim Means gets hit. Kevin Holland's got enough versatility, athleticism, power in both hands to get the finish. So I think Kevin Holland, once again, maybe a little bit of a slow start, like he was against Alex Oliveira his last time out, but eventually gets the finish. It gets the knockout win against Tim Means.
Yeah, so you're going to play the under. I'm seeing a trend here. You don't get paid by the minute, Jordan. In Texas, they're going to play the under in the Cowboy fight here at a round and a half, under in the Yanez fight, 2.5 rounds, and the under in the Holland Means fight, also under 2.5 rounds. You can get plus money on 2 of the 3 of those, so pretty good value there. When you look at the main event here, I feel like the consensus is, certainly with our experts, that maybe it is priced properly for Calvin Kattar here against Josh Emmett. And look, Kattar coming out of Boston, we know the pedigree here. Is the number too big for you to play it, or do you think it is priced right and Kattar should be clearly over $2 favorite here? Minus 230 is what we're seeing against Emmett.
I think it's a little high. I think Calvin Kattar should be the favorite. It should be the overwhelming favorite, but not by as much as he is. He looked great against Giga Chikadze. Who would have ever thought he would bounce back from that Max Holloway bludgeoning and do what he did to Chikadze, the guy that was supposed to be the next big thing at 145. He's got great boxing, does Calvin Kattar. He can rely on his wrestling. Obviously, he's extremely durable. Josh Emmett, though, is an interesting puzzle because he's got knockout power in both hands. We saw him. He's a slow starter, notorious slow starter, but he knocked out Michael Johnson when he needed to. And I think one punch in that fight, and he was down in the rounds, 3 rounds. So I think that's always a weapon and always something that you have to look at in a fight. And he's 8-2 in the UFC for a reason. He's very good. He just hasn't fought the level of competition that Calvin Kattar has. I think Kattar just outboxes him, keeps off the wrestling, maybe gets a takedown or 2. Both guys so durable. So battle tested, but Calvin Kattar in a parlay or Calvin Kattar likely via judge's decision is my play for the main event.
There you go. So you see a decision for Calvin Kattar here, plus $1.30. So 4.5 rounds, juice to the over. And I think most of our experts, concur, Jordan, that we think this fight might go deeper into the night. It is interesting from Kattar's perspective because normally at this weight class, he's normally the bigger puncher. But Emmett feels like the bigger puncher here. Is that why you think maybe it's just mispriced just a skosh?
Yeah, just a little bit because that is a difference maker, that right hand. Josh Emmett also, I think he can rely on a little bit of his wrestling. It's just that he always fights from behind. And especially with a guy like Calvin Kattar, get ahead on the judges' scorecards, he's just going to utilize his boxing, which might be the best in the featherweight division, although Max Holloway probably argues that. But nonetheless, Calvin Kattar just built how he's built as a fighter. Boxing, the wrestling makes me believe that he's just going to get the wins in each round, and then eventually get to the judges' scorecards.
All right, very quickly, got about 30 seconds to go here, Jordan. When you look deep in the card here, and you got the Eddie Winelands back on this card, you got Phil Hawes, you got Darren Wynn, you got Roman Dolidze, Kyle Dawkins on the fight. Is there any other fight that really stands out to you on this very loaded card?
Yeah, well, I think there's finishes because I think everybody's worried about going to the judges' scorecards in Texas. But you mentioned Darren Wynn, undersized and really just kind of like lackluster. He hasn't lived up to the hype. I think Philip Hawes causes issues because of his athleticism, his size. Probably gets a finish in that fight. So I think Phil Hawes via knockout is a play certainly worth a look on the undercard.
Yeah, do not let it go to the hands of the judges if you can help it. Jordan, appreciate the time and the information as always, my friend. When we come back, Reed Kuhn joins the program. Come on back. It's First Strike right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Want more betting insights to give you an edge? Well, check out VSiN's Best Bets podcast. You can listen to daily sports betting highlights from the entire 24/7 stream of VSiN experts tracking line moves, odds, props, wins, losses, and bad beats from sportsbooks in Vegas and across the entire country. Download the VSiN Best Bets podcast now at VSiN.com/podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you're listening to First Strike wherever you get your podcasts, and it's always good to have Reed Kuhn join the program here because he has great numbers from an analytical style here. You can follow Reed as I do on Twitter at Fightnomics. He's the author of a self-titled book as well. Reed, great to have you back on, my friend. I want to get right to the top of this card here because I know you have some plays that you like in this card when you break it down analytically. Calvin Kattar against Josh Emmett here. We talked about this here throughout the hour as the main event. Over a $2 favorite for Kattar. Is that too steep for what the numbers show you?
Yeah, I was expecting him to be the favorite here, and I'm not really surprised by the price. I still think there's value there. I'm still going to be backing Calvin Kattar. When you look at the numbers, he comes out strong offensively. He is a very good striker. He fights long, rangy. Josh Emmett, his number one metric here is his power. He's actually scored 11 knockdowns. You don't normally see a lot of featherweights racking up those kind of numbers. His knockdown rate, per strike is actually very high, higher than probably the light heavyweight average. So he literally punches above his weight. But Calvin Kattar can fight long. He can fight rangy. He can win rounds. And when I think about why his stats are the way they are, they're good. They're not spectacular. It's because he has faced some really stiff competition. And so that has kind of deflated some of his metrics, I think. But I still think he is the better, well-rounded fighter here. And so I'm willing to lay some juice for him.
Also, when you do and take into account with your models, sometimes on the round props here, you try to find some advantages there. Have you found one here? Again, 4.5 rounds for a main event here. You mentioned the power that Josh Emmett brings, and certainly we know Calvin Kattar can pack a punch in that right hand as well. It is juiced to the over at 4.5 rounds. Is there any advantage that you've seen numbers-wise here in this total?
So I definitely lean a longer fight because I am backing Kattar as more of a technician and a point striker. If you were going underdog on Emmett, you would assume that he's going to get that early finish, and that would pay out big. But I don't think that's the storyline here. I think Kattar is going to fight a measured pace. So maybe 4.5 is juicing that is pretty steep. I might use over 2.5 in a parlay. You might have to pay a little extra for that, but it's good for a parlay. That protects you for that late finish because 5 rounds is a long time to fight. I do think it's going to take a while to develop, though.
Yeah, kind of like what we talked about earlier at the beginning of the show with Finocchiaro. Maybe the way to go here, if I'm picking up what you're putting down, Reed, is if you look at Kattar by decision, you can turn that into plus money as well at plus 130 if this one does go to the judges' scorecard. Let's take a look at some other fights that you like in this card, certainly from a numbers perspective. Kevin Holland, I'm always intrigued by the way he runs his mouth in there, but he backs it up most of the time against Tim Means, a solid favorite here at 170 pounds. What do you make of this matchup here where Means right now plus 240 as a dog, a big favorite here, Kevin Holland minus 285?
Yeah, the numbers really look more extreme on this one. Both guys are accurate strikers, but you look at Holland, first of all, 81-inch reach. He's also 9 years younger than Tim Means. He has better strike avoidance. He even has a couple metrics like his takedown rate, which is even higher. So he lights up the tail of the tape the way I see it with statistics. So he looks really good on paper. I'm backing him. And in terms of whether or not this goes the distance, I think more people would be expecting a finish because of the way he fights. I mean, Kevin Holland is going to look like he's fighting at a different speed against Tim Means, I think. So he will be landing some shots. But Tim Means is also a pretty durable veteran. So I actually think this might go the over. So my bigger play, though, is just Holland one way or the other. Playing that total is less of a strong lean. It's a mild lean at best. But I do feel strongly that Holland looks good. I think I might be using him in some parlays because this is a fairly chalky card, at least the way I see it. I'm backing mostly favorites here, but Kevin Holland is certainly one of the stronger ones.
Reed, it's interesting, too, because if you go back to, say, Yuri Prochazka last week against Glover Teixeira when he won the belt, and nobody thought he'd get that win by submission, and certainly not in the 5th and final round to get that done in spectacular fashion. To your point, most people think Kevin Holland will get this done. If he gets it done inside the distance, it would be by KO, TKO, or DQ at plus $2. What about a sub? Because when Kevin Holland sometimes, even off his back, He's going to go for stuff here. Is there any shot at the long shot at a sub here at plus 550? Or do you think if you were to play it inside the decision, you play it the more chalky way, maybe KO or TKO here at plus $2?
No, I think I'm going to go the over on this. I know it's very enticing to look at someone who gets finishes and to believe that they can keep doing that. But regression to the mean is always there. You know, you throw a guy like Tim Means in there. The guy's crafty. He's been around a long time. Older fighters, more experienced fighters tend to be harder to submit, actually. Submission is one of those things that actually gets better with time. Or the grappling overall gets better with time, whereas the knockout game gets harder and harder the older you get. So if anything, I would go over, but really it's really just backing Holland one way or the other is my strongest play.
Reed, let's talk about another fight here because, when Cerrone Wynn came into the UFC, he felt like a miniature version of Daniel Cormier. And look, he started off like a house of fire in the UFC. He's had some stumbles along the way, now going up against Phil Hawes. And Wynn right now is over a $2 dog in this fight here. What do you make of this matchup here of a battle of 33-year-olds?
Yeah, I like Cerrone Wynn here. I think the odds should be closer than they are, and so I'm going to go underdog. It's not a lock. He's still fighting a much bigger, better striker, but Cerrone Wynn has that wrestling. He attempts takedowns at more than twice the normal UFC average. He lands them above average, and when he's on the ground, he is dominating people. So it's a wrestler situation, and I like to back wrestlers. If you've been betting MMA long enough, you look for people who can wrestle, and that also means I'm backing the over. So Phil Hawes, he is just this rangy, good striker. Cerrone Wynn is going to get in there, close that distance. I'm hoping it goes to a decision. It might be a close call, but I'm willing to take that kind of plus money on this.
No question about it. And again, what Wynn has to do. He's got to utilize. Get inside and get this fight down to the ground when he has an 8-inch reach disadvantage in this fight. So I'm picking up what you're putting down there. I mentioned right off the top of this card here, but you look at Kyle Daukaus here against Roman Dolidze in that very first fight of the night. Very intriguing there. Daukaus a solid favorite, over $2.50 favorite here. Any shot at the dog here, or do the numbers back the favorite in Daukaus?
Yeah, similar storyline to last time. I think Kyle Daukaus is going to be the much more eager wrestler, and he's been very good on the ground. He's also got a submission game, so he can get a finish there. But this is another one of these chalky guys that I am backing here. I think he is a justifiable favorite, and in this case, I do think it's going to go the under. I think a finish is more likely than not, and if it happens, it's probably Daukaus by sub. That's been kind of a bankable bet with him over the years. That's his bread and butter. So I think this fight does not stay standing very long, and eventually he gets a submission.
Of course, talking with Reed Kuhn here. Follow him on Twitter as I do, at Fightnomics. And Reed, let's take a look a little bit deeper down, certainly on this card, that people might think could be potentially fight of the night here in the main event, outside of the main event, rather. And that could be the Cowboy, Donald Cerrone, back in there against Joe Lauzon. It feels like maybe a Hall of Fame fight for two guys that we'd like to see fight forever, but we know they can't. The first time around, it got steamed over $2 for the Cowboy here just a couple weeks ago. Now, a little bit more even fight here, minus $1.65 we're seeing for the Cowboy. Do you think Lauzon can pull the upset, or do the numbers back the Cowboy?
Yeah, you mentioned this is a Hall of Fame matchup, and this is legends. We have over 10 hours, actually over 11 hours, 11 hours of octagon time between these two guys. I've actually worked with both of them throughout my career of doing advisory work, so it makes it a difficult fight for me to watch. But yeah, I hope this lands them both in the Hall of Fame. That's where they deserve to be. But on paper, let's look at this. Joe Lauzon does his best when he's grappling, but Donald Cerrone is pretty good off of his back, and he actually has pretty good takedown defense. You're not going to just drag him down and grind this out. So I do think that this is going to be standing for some extended periods. And when that happens, Cerrone is definitely the slicker striker. The only thing that's degrading or deflating some of Cerrone's striking metrics is simply that he has been in there with some pretty tough talent. And I think Joe took more time off. He wasn't fighting the same elite talent that Cerrone was. So if anything, these numbers are deflated for Cerrone, and they still come out backing Cerrone here. Now, in terms of a finish, that, again, it's kind of counterintuitive here. I would actually go plus money on it over 2.5. So I think everybody's considering, well, Cerrone's going to get a knockout, or Joe Lauzon is going to get down and get a submission. I'll go the opposite direction and say, I'll take the plus money on it over 2.5. and expect that both these guys maybe are not where they used to be 5 years ago, and the finishers that they were, but I think they'll still put in a fun fight, and man, expect a big round of applause after these guys finish.
I just know that fight will be the fan favorites fight of the night. That is for sure. Reed, really appreciate the time and the information as always, my friend. Have a profitable Saturday night. We'll catch up with you again next week right here on First Strike. I want to thank Reed Kuhn, Jordan Sherwood, Kevin Iole, and Luffin for joining us here on First Strike on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.